Star Trek Picard boldly went backwards in its best season yet. With the whole TNG crew back in the mix, you know there's enough Easter eggs to fill the Alpha Quadrant. These are the ones you may have missed. The series opens with the text in the 25th century, in stylized blue typeface over black. This will be familiar to fans of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which begins with the phrase in the 23rd century. In that same print, this is the first signal that this season of Star Trek Picard will borrow liberally from the popular film. In addition to a few plot beats throughout the season, the series has a definite aesthetic fondness for the entire era of movies with the original series cast. The alarm klaxon in Beverly Crusher's ship indicating a security breach is the same one that sounds when Spock's quarters are invaded in Star Trek III: The Search for Spock. Likewise, the style of the jacket that Beverly wears in the episode's teaser is reminiscent of the away team jacket from The Wrath of Khan, which has a similarly broad collar. Later, when we get a look at the redesigned hand phasers, we can see that they've reverted to something closer to the swept-back models from the classic era, very much like those seen in The Search for Spock and The Undiscovered Country. Of course, there's also the design of the USS Titan A, which is identified as a Neo-Constitution class refit. It cuts a silhouette that's closer to the refit Constitution class of the original series films than any of the Next Generation era ships, and throughout the season, it appears that rectangular warp nacelles have come back into fashion at the turn of the 21st century. Season 3 of Star Trek Picard is plainly designed to be consumed independently from the first two seasons of the series. Most of the original characters introduced earlier are absent or have reduced roles. Still, the series does make a subtle acknowledgement of its own origins. Our first images of the season are a brief montage of beautiful and peaceful images of stellar phenomena, with an early 20th century ballad playing underneath it. This is also how the first episode of the series Remembrance begins. In that episode, the soundtrack was Blue Skies by Irving Berlin, as performed by Bing Crosby, a song that Data sang at Riker and Troy's wedding in Star Trek Nemesis. Season 2 of Picard also uses a 20th century ballad in its opening episode. In that case, Je ne regrette rien by Edith Piaf. This time our opening number is I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire by the Ink Spots. This tune has no prior history with Star Trek, but might be familiar to gamers in the audience as it features in the Fallout series. Episode 1's first scenes are set aboard an unfamiliar starship, the Helios, where the camera pans across a cluttered desk. Eagle-eyed fans will quickly put together that this workspace belongs to Dr. Beverly Crusher, thanks to a number of obscure visual clues. These include classic drama masks, recalling Crusher's love of theater, and the same sorts of flowers that she tends in her quarters in the Next Generation episode Cause and Effect. A computer is playing back one of Captain Picard's log entries from the Best of Both Worlds. And the following log in the queue is the one that opens Encounter at Farpoint, the premiere episode of The Next Generation. She has a plaque awarded to a medical away team as honorary citizens of Core Caroli 5, likely in recognition of a mission that we hear about but never actually see in the Next Generation episode Allegiance.
We have finally succeeded in eradicating the Fyrox plague on Core Caroli 5 and will soon be preparing to leave orbit and proceed to our next mission.
Since these are all pretty obscure references, we then pan down to a more obvious one, the footlocker of Beverly's late husband, Lieutenant Commander Jack Crusher. Just as in previous seasons of Star Trek Picard, Jean-Luc's home in Le Bar, France displays a number of artifacts that are familiar to Trekkies. A few of these items receive some special attention in the scene where Picard does some spring cleaning with his girlfriend, Laris. First, of course, is a large painting of the USS Enterprise D that used to hang in his ready room in The Next Generation, which he considers giving to Geordi, LaForge, and the Starfleet Museum. Just below it, there's also a sextant on the mantle that may be the one from Picard's quarters. The Mintarkan tapestry from Who Watches the Watchers that used to drape over his chair on both Enterprises still adorns the chair behind his desk at home. There's a Bajoran memento, gold models of both Enterprise D and Enterprise E, and finally his Resican flute from the Inner Light. Perhaps the most precious of all his mementos, as it is his only keepsake from his lifetime of memories on the long-dead planet Catan. Later, he sits handwriting a note, and the Kurlan Neskars, a precious archaeological artifact and a gift from his mentor, Professor Galen, can be seen on his table. We get one additional reference here, as the authorization code that Picard uses to decrypt Beverly's message is Picard 47 Alpha Tango, the same security code that he uses to activate the auto-destruct sequence on the Enterprise E in Star Trek First Contact. After receiving Beverly's encrypted distress call, Picard meets up with his old friend Riker at the 10 Forward Lounge in Los Angeles. While reminiscing, Riker mentions that the crew of the Enterprise had previously used Beverly's Myriad codec to encrypt their transmissions while on a mission to Rigel 7. However, Rigel 7 is a planet whose first and only appearance is in the original Star Trek pilot, The Cage, from 1965. Though this footage would later be reused in the classic 1966 two-parter, The Menagerie. The incident to which Riker refers has never been depicted or mentioned before on screen. The Hellbird virus that offers a final clue to decoding Beverly's location is another new addition to the canon, a background plot retconned into the best of both worlds. We learn that the Borg attempted to foul the Enterprise's navigation using a computer virus, while Picard was held captive as Locutus of Borg.
I am Locutus of Borg. Resistance is futile.
When Picard summons Riker to the 10 Forward Bar in Los Angeles, we learn that there is an upcoming celebration planned for Frontier Day, described as Starfleet's 250th anniversary. For this date to line up with where we appear to be in the show's timeline, it would have to be a celebration not of Starfleet's founding, but of its first deep space mission, which launched in 2051 under the command of Captain Jonathan Archer. The adventures of this first Starship Enterprise, also known as the NX-01, are the subject of the prequel television series Star Trek Enterprise, which aired on UPN from 2001 to 2005. Out of the 5 first live-action Star Trek series, Enterprise is the one that tends to get the least love, though there is the occasional nod to its historical significance in the universe, such as the christening of Archer's space dock on Season 4 of Star Trek Discovery.
How come you have so many Enterprise Ds?
Oh, the fat ones? No one wants those.
You better leave the bottle.
Incidentally, the souvenir Starship models up for sale in 10 Forward appear to be items from the Eaglemoss collection of Star Trek starships. Eaglemoss declared bankruptcy during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, after producing over 400 unique Starship models from across the Star Trek canon. Metalis Prime, the neon-lit city planet where Commander Raffi Musica is working undercover for Starfleet intelligence, is named for Picard showrunner Terry Metalis, who also wrote this episode. However, he didn't name the planet after himself. The planet was first introduced in dialogue on a 2002 episode of Star Trek Enterprise by showrunner Brannon Braga, for whom Metalis was working as an assistant. Metalis would return to Star Trek years later to become co-showrunner of Picard Season 2 with Akiva Goldsman, before finally taking the reins for its final run. Metalis' fingerprints are all over this season. Fans of his previous series, Sci-Fi's 12 Monkeys, will recognize the actor playing Captain Shaw. That's Todd Stashwick, who played the villainous Deacon on 12 Monkeys. He also guest starred on a 2004 episode of Star Trek Enterprise as Tarlok, a Vulcan officer who turns out to be an undercover Romulan spy. Picard and Riker's shuttle approach towards the USS Titan is very evocative of similar sequences in which Captain Kirk and company return to the refitted USS Enterprise in the various chapters of the original Star Trek film series. Once Picard and Riker are aboard the Titan, references to Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan continue as a crewman blows into a digital boatswain's whistle to signal their arrival. The same ritual is performed when Kirk is welcomed aboard the Enterprise in The Wrath of Khan, and the prop used is almost identical to the one played by Yeoman Burke in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. The influence of the original series era of Star Trek films extends to non-diegetic sound choices as well. The arrangement of the musical score when Picard and Riker enter the bridge of the Titan and the entire sequence of the ship's departure from space dock are extremely reminiscent of James Horner's score from a parallel scene in The Wrath of Khan. Though composer Stephen Barton also incorporates an original motif for this series and Jerry Goldsmith's famous theme from the motion picture and The Next Generation, his arrangements evoke the feeling of The Wrath of Khan and the search for Spock for viewers who may not recognize it outright. If you want to hear the inspirations for these compositions, listen to Enterprise Clear's Moorings from the Wrath of Khan soundtrack. There's even a brief quote from Cliff Idleman's score from The Undiscovered Country as the ship emerges from the space dock doors. When Raffi asks the computer to name all the big events coming up in the next few months, a pretty ridiculous request considering we're talking about the entire galaxy here, the computer displays a whopping 3 results. First, the Gratitude Festival, a Bajoran holiday first seen in the Deep Space Nine episode Fascination. Empire Union Day is a Klingon holiday mentioned only in a quasi-educational audio tape called Power Klingon, released in 1993 as part of a series of books and tapes about the Klingon language by its inventor, linguist Mark Okrand. Long out of print and remembered only by those who study the language, this is about as deep as deep-cut references get. The Red Lady Raffi learns about from a contact on Matalis turns out to be a code name for a statue being dedicated at a Starfleet recruitment center. The statue honors Captain Rachel Garrett, commander of the USS Enterprise C, whose only appearance is in the Next Generation episode Yesterday's Enterprise. Garrett is killed in battle while coming to the aid of a Klingon colony under Romulan attack. This is a more pivotal moment in history than it seemed, as Garrett and her crew's sacrifice helped to avert decades of war. Also on screen during this scene are images of a few starships that have not made canon appearances before, including the Odyssey-class USS Enterprise F, which was designed via a fan contest for the game Star Trek Online. In the opening episode of Season 3, Admiral Picard and Captain Riker commandeer one of the USS Titan's shuttlecraft for an unauthorized rescue mission to Dr. Beverly Crusher's ship, the SS Helios. However, in the following chapter, Disengage, the shuttle is destroyed. As the wreckage flies towards the camera, we get a clear look at the shuttle's name, the Saavik. The vessel's namesake is a junior officer introduced in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, where she was portrayed by Kirstie Alley in her first major film role.
Ishvengi, Komi.
Winga Chlami Buffek Savikam.
Lieutenant Saavik was Spock's protege and seemed positioned to take his place as a regular member of the Enterprise crew after Spock's death at the end of that film. However, when Spock actor Leonard Nimoy decided not to leave the franchise, Saavik was recast and gradually given smaller roles in the next two films before disappearing altogether. That is until a recent official Star Trek franchise Instagram post revealed that Saavik eventually rose to the rank of captain and took command of the first USS Titan in the late 23rd century, making the shuttlecraft's name a tribute to her legacy. Anytime you see a wall of text on a display in Star Trek, you're bound to find a few Easter eggs. Disengage features quite a few in the criminal record for the Ferengi gangster Sneed. Sneed's list of known associates includes some familiar names from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Quark of Ferenginar is, of course, the series' scheming bartender. Though by this point in the Star Trek timeline, he's also the owner of a franchise of bars and gambling establishments bearing his name, as seen on Star Trek Lower Decks and in previous seasons of Picard. Brunt is Quark's nemesis from the Ferengi Commerce Authority, played by Star Trek's Man of a Thousand Faces, Jeffrey Combs. Morn of Luria is Quark's most steady customer, appearing in 93 episodes of Deep Space Nine and never speaking a word. The final name on Sneed's list of known associates is Sadian O'Connor, a smuggler and playboy who first appeared in the infamously campy episode of Star Trek The Next Generation called The Outrageous O'Connor.
Now, that's sex appeal.
He has since appeared in animated form on both Lower Decks and Star Trek Prodigy. We can now add a reference in Picard to his surprisingly illustrious resume. While investigating the destruction of the Starfleet Recruitment Center, Commander Raffi Musica looks into the criminal record of the Romulan outlaw Lorak Tuluko, whom Starfleet has named as the perpetrator. Raffi disagrees, believing him to be too small-time for such a serious crime. Over Raffi's shoulder, we get a quick look at Tuluko's history, which references two worlds that have never been seen in canon, but nevertheless have long histories in the Star Trek franchise. The planets Vendor and Rator 3 were both first mentioned in a 1973 episode of Star Trek the Animated Series, entitled The Survivor. The shape-shifting Vendorians introduced in that episode wouldn't make another appearance on television until Lower Decks brought them back for a gag in 2020. Season 3 of Star Trek Picard pays homage to the style and tone of the original 6 Star Trek feature films, so it's only appropriate that the season's antagonists be cut from the same cloth as those classic movie villains. The casting of Amanda Plummer as the dastardly Captain Vadic is surely no accident. Her late father, Christopher Plummer, portrayed the Klingon General Chang in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country in 1991. Their characters have no direct relation, but there are definitely some stylistic connections beyond their actors' family ties. Both antagonists plainly relish in their villainy, indulging in flowery speeches and theatrical intimidation.
Tickle us, do we not laugh? Prick us, do we not bleed? Wrong us, shall we not revenge?
The fact that both Chang and Vadic twirl around in their big captain's chairs and order their crews to open fire with casual flicks of the wrist might just be a coincidence. Or it could be a knowing tribute from a daughter to the father in whose footsteps she treads. However, it's almost certainly deliberate that, during Vadic's menacing view-screen conversation in Disengage, the sound designers for Picard have brought back the same ominous communications klaxon used to punctuate General Chang's hails in Star Trek VI. When Worf introduces himself to Raffi on Matalis Prime, He reads off a list of impressive-sounding titles, accumulated over the course of his 281 appearances across TNG, DS9, and the TNG movies. He is the son of Moog, a Klingon dignitary who was killed by Romulans when he was a young boy. He is also the son of Sergei of House Roshenko, referring to his adoptive human parents Sergei and Helena Roshenko. Worf also names himself as a member of the House of Martok, the family that he was inducted into during Deep Space Nine after breaking out of Dominion prison with General Martok.
Worf, honor has been satisfied. Stay down.
Worf is the slayer of Gowron, referencing when he defeated the dishonorable Klingon High Chancellor in single combat and installed Martok in his place in the late DS9 episode, Tacking into the Wind. Finally, he's bane to the Duras family, his nemesis since early in the Next Generation. Duras is the house of the Klingons who betrayed Worf's parents to the Romulans and later killed his mate, Kayla. Worf, in turn, has killed 3 of the last 4 heads of the House of Duras. Duras himself and his 2 sisters, Lursa and Betor, and bested their heir, Toral, in combat. The 3rd episode, 17 Seconds, reveals that the masterminds behind the attack on the Starfleet Recruitment Center are changelings, major antagonists introduced in DS9. As their name suggests, changelings are shapeshifters whose natural state is liquid. They have the ability to perfectly imitate any person, creature, or object they choose. They command the Dominion, an empire even more vast and powerful than the Federation, located in the distant Gamma Quadrant. In Picard, Worf tells Raffi that he has been contacted by a friend from the Changelings' Great Link, who warned him that a splinter group of changelings is aiming to attack the Federation. It's not confirmed, but this man of honor is likely none other than Odo, the former chief of security of Space Station Deep Space Nine. Though a changeling himself, Odo fought on the side of the Federation in the Dominion War, serving with then-Lieutenant Commander Worf throughout the conflict. After the Dominion's surrender, Odo returned to the Great Link in order to cure his people of a deadly virus and help to foster a lasting peace. The actor who memorably played Odo, René Auberjonois, passed away in 2019. Picard's 4th episode, No-Win Scenario, opens with a flashback to 5 years before the events of this season, in which retired Admiral Picard is enjoying a meal at Guinan's 10 Forward Lounge in Los Angeles. While there, a group of young officers ask Picard about his encounter with the Hirogen, a species of ritualistic hunters who made their debut in Star Trek Voyager, hence the mention of Admiral Janeway. The adventure in question is one we've never seen before, and would have taken place between Star Trek Nemesis and Star Trek Picard. This isn't the only reference to a Hirogen on Picard, however, as one of the ex-Borg seen on the artifact in the Season 1 episode, Nepenthe, is an assimilated Hirogen. Later in the episode, Picard regales several admirers with the story of the classic TNG episode, Darmok, in which Picard attempts to survive on a hostile world with an alien captain who speaks only in idioms. This is the one that Picard would seem most likely to enjoy recalling. It's a dilemma that was solved through patience, compassion, and communication. It also happens to be one of the best episodes of TNG. When 7 of 9 first searchers transport to Officer Foster's quarters, there's a familiar artifact on his desk. A messy stack of thin metal cylinders arranged in a shape like a tumbleweed. This is Calto, a Vulcan strategy game enjoyed by Lieutenant Commander Tuvok and other members of the Voyager crew. 7 is particularly adept at the game and is seen effortlessly defeating veteran player Tuvok in the episode The Omega Directive. 7 has also been seen teaching the game to Raffi in the final moments of the Picard Season 1 finale. Later, in No-Win Scenario, Captain Shaw suggests that 7 search Foster's quarters again to find a pot or vase in which Foster's changeling imposter may have hidden while sleeping in liquid form. 7 checks inside a light fixture and finds a bucket that's more or less identical to the one that Constable Odo of Deep Space Nine used to sleep in. This is a pretty silly inclusion, given that Odo's bucket is not a traditional changeling artifact. Instead, it's something he would have acquired from the Cardassians long before he even knew that other changelings existed. While Odo has since joined the Great Link, which would immediately share the knowledge of his habit with the entire species, it's unlikely that the changelings would want to honor his people's one and only traitor. Picard finally clarifies a baffling piece of Star Trek canon involving the franchise's famous simulator room, the holodeck. When the USS Voyager was hurled halfway across the galaxy, the ship's crew was forced to brave a long, dangerous journey back to Federation space with no allies or support. Despite concerns about the ship's limited energy supply leading to replicator rationing, Voyager's holodecks, a purely recreational system, remained in service for the entire 7-year mission. The series handwaves this by explaining that holodecks have their own independent power source that is incompatible with the rest of the ship. But it feels a lot more like an excuse for the writers to continue to tell the Next Generation style holodeck fantasy story despite the more dire stakes of Voyager.
Ensign Kim, have you had any luck getting power from the holodeck reactors?
Not yet. We tried hooking them to the power grid, and we ended up blowing out half the relays.
Picard finally offers an explanation as to why Starfleet would give its holodecks their own power source, so that they can be used as a pleasant sanctuary in the event that the ship should be damaged beyond repair. There, the crew could enjoy a nice diversion while, say, plummeting hopelessly into the heart of a gravity well, as a Titan does during this episode. This allows Jean-Luc and his son Jack Crusher to share a quiet moment in a simulation of 10 forward, while the rest of the ship's systems are on the fritz. It's a flimsy explanation, but it's better than nothing. In no-win scenario, the mysterious Captain Vadic uses an ornate dagger to slice off her own hand, which transforms into the face of her changeling overlord. If this dagger looks familiar, it should. This is the Jackal, crafted by knifesmith Gil Hibben, and employed in an assortment of genre movies and TV shows. For instance, it's the rogue vampire hunter Faye's signature weapon on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's also not the first time the Jackal has appeared in Star Trek canon. It played the role of a ceremonial Riemann dagger used by Tom Hardy's Praetor Shinzon in Star Trek Nemesis, even being featured on the film's theatrical poster. There's no indication, however, that it's supposed to be the same knife. It's likely just an Easter egg for fans, as well as a nod to one of the cooler custom blades ever made for the silver screen. During his tirade in the 10 forward holodeck simulation, the Titan's Captain Shaw reveals that he is a veteran of the Battle of Wolf 359, the Federation's devastating defeat at the hands of the Borg. This battle takes place during the famous The Next Generation two-parter The Best of Both Worlds, in which Picard is assimilated by the Borg and forced to lead their invasion force.
I am Locutus of Borg. Resistance is futile.
In those episodes, though, only the aftermath of the massacre is seen in that story. Our first and only canonical glimpse at the battle comes in the opening scenes of Emissary, the first episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, in which we learn that Benjamin Sisko is also a survivor of Wolf 359. Shaw served aboard the USS Constance. Diagrams of the Constance also appear during the closing credits of the season, which identify it as a Constellation-class starship. Picard's 5th episode, Imposter, reveals that this latest crop of changeling infiltrators has mastered the ability to replicate the internal structure of whatever species they've morphed into. This allows them to circumvent any existing method of detection the Federation put in place during the Dominion War. This is meant to demonstrate that the typical process for proving someone isn't a changeling, by extracting blood from them and ensuring that it doesn't turn into goo, isn't effective any longer. This isn't as huge a development as it seems to be, as taking blood has never been a reliable way to determine whether or not someone is a changeling. The shapeshifters had already found a way around the standard blood test midway through Deep Space Nine. In the Season 4 premiere, The Way of the Warrior, Klingon General Martok cuts his hand to prove he is who he claims to be. A year later, we learn that this Martok is in fact a changeling and that the real Martok has been imprisoned in the Gamma Quadrant since before his doppelganger's first appearance on the show. Captain Sisko's father, Joseph, has his own theory as to how this works. In the episode Homefront, Joseph decries the uselessness of subjecting citizens to blood screenings. He points out that a changeling could easily store real blood within its assumed body, in case it ever needed to prove its identity. The changelings we see in Picard are definitely more advanced, given their ability to retain their form even when dead or unconscious, but the ability to fool a blood test isn't actually a major feature of the upgrade. Imposter also sees Shaw retake command of his ship from the mutinous Picard and Riker. As he escorts Picard and Riker to their hearing with Starfleet intelligence, his two rivals defend themselves by mentioning the number of times they've saved the entire galaxy. In response, Shaw lists off a few examples of when the crew of Picard's Enterprise broke bad, arguing that saving the Federation a few times has made their service records a wash at best. First, Shaw mentions a crash landing of the Enterprise D saucer section in Star Trek Generations. This may be an iconic moment of Star Trek cinema, but it really shouldn't be held against them, as an emergency saucer landing is just one of the ship's safety features working exactly as designed. We accept no slander of Counselor Troy's piloting skills. Shaw also brings up Picard's rebellion against the Federation in Star Trek Insurrection, which he implies was motivated by Picard's desire to sleep with charming Baku villager Arneej. Then again, seeing as Picard was disobeying orders to save the Baku helped to prevent Starfleet from participating in a genocide, it's a little disingenuous to frame Picard as the bad guy in this one too. As for the third incident he mentions, in which Picard almost wipes out all life in the galaxy by creating a spatial anomaly that grows backward through time in the TNG finale All Good Things, Shaw may have a point. It's hard to give Picard credit for preventing pan-galactic doom when his time-traveling caused a threat to begin with. Imposter boasts the long-awaited return of fan-favorite character Ro Laren, who hasn't been seen since the next-to-last episode of TNG. Picard's most complicated protege, Ro joins the crew of the Enterprise during Season 5 and appears in a total of 8 episodes. The character was popular enough amongst fans and writers that she was intended to feature in the cast of Deep Space Nine, but actor Michelle Forbes was reluctant to sign an extended contract. This led to the character of Kira Nerys being created in her place. A different fate was written for Ro, who closes out her run on The Next Generation by defecting from Starfleet to join the human and Bajoran resistance group called the Maquis.
You're going with them?
It's been a long time since I really felt like I belonged somewhere.
Now, Ro has returned as a commander in Starfleet intelligence, and she arrives on the Titan to interrogate Picard about his efforts to commandeer the ship to pursue his agenda. This gives Ro and Picard the opportunity to resolve the tension created by their unpleasant parting in preemptive strike, and puts a bow on Ro's canonical Star Trek tenure. With her death in this episode, it now appears that after nearly a 3-decade hiatus, we really have seen the last of Ro Laren. The Bounty sees Riker, Raffi, and Worf sneak through the vault at Daystrom Station. They're hoping to learn what the changelings were after when they burgled the facility before the start of the season. As they search the secret archive of technology, they pass by several displays containing artifacts from throughout the history of the Star Trek franchise. The label of the first display we see is too blurry to identify for certain, but it appears to be a Thalaran weapon like the one used by Shinzon in Star Trek Nemesis. There's the Genesis 2 device, apparently an upgraded version of the planet-creating machine from the Wrath of Khan, as well as a body of James T. Kirk, recovered from Beridian 3 after his burial in Star Trek Generations. We also see a Borg vinculum, the device that processes the thoughts of assimilated drones as originally seen on Star Trek Voyager. There's even a genetically modified Tribble. While no specific items from DS9 are seen aboard the station, it's not entirely left out of the fun. The collection itself is curated by Section 31, the immoral covert ops organization introduced in Season 6 of DS9.
And what does Section 31 do, apart from kidnapping Starfleet officers?
We search out and identify potential dangers to the Federation.
Towards the end of Picard's 6th episode, The Bounty, the audience learns that the advanced artificial intelligence which guards the vaults of Daystrom Station is in fact a new synthetic android. The body houses the restored memories of Data, his siblings Lore, B4, Alton Soong, and Data's daughter, Lal. However, the clues as to the AI's identity are laid almost from the moment Riker, Raffi, and Worf arrive at the station. When Worf swaps out the computer security key with the hacked copy he acquired in Metalis Prime, the computer says thank you in a number of different voices. The first of these voices is that of Data himself.
Thank you.
The rest of the clues are sussed out by Riker throughout the adventure. A holographic crow appears in the corridor, which is an echo of one of Data's dreams from the TNG episode Birthright. Later, the team is confronted by Professor Moriarty. Moriarty is, of course, a fictional character who became a sentient life form when the Enterprise computer attempted to create a worthy adversary for Data. There are also a few audio cues. The sound of a violin, Data's primary musical instrument, begins echoing throughout the station. And when Riker recognizes that it's playing excerpts from Pop Goes the Weasel, he flashes back to his first meeting with Data in Encounter at Farpoint. While on the run from the Changeling infiltrated Starfleet and looking for a way to rescue the away team from Daystrom Station, the USS Titan pays a visit to the Fleet Museum, the final resting place of many legendary vessels. Several ships are visible, including the Defiant, the Enterprise A, Voyager, and the HMS Bounty. There are also a few other ships visible around the perimeter of the old space dock. Eagle-eyed viewers will make out 2 examples of the fan-favorite Akira class from Star Trek First Contact, a Nebula-class ship originating from TNG, an old-style Romulan bird of prey from the original series, and a Klingon battlecruiser, as seen in Star Trek The Motion Picture. There is even a Constellation-class ship. Could it be the Stargazer, Picard's first command? However, one noteworthy ship is visible only in a few shots and never gets a close-up, the Enterprise NX-01 from Star Trek Enterprise. We get a decent look at it during the montage that plays under Alton Soon's personal log, and from there we can see that the NX-01 has received a refit since its last appearance on Enterprise. It has gotten a familiar drive section similar to the one found on the Constitution-class ships. The 6th episode, The Bounty, brings LeVar Burton back to reprise the role of Geordi LaForge, who is now a Starfleet Commodore and the curator of the Fleet Museum. Geordi also brings along his daughter, Alondra, portrayed by Burton's real-life daughter, Mika Burton. This isn't the only backstage bonus that this episode has to offer. When the Daystrom Institute AI, which we later learn is Data, scans Will Riker's face, we see his service record appear on our screen. This confirms some information from official reference materials, like his mother's name, Betty, and also gives us Riker's birthday, August 19th, the same as actor Jonathan Frakes. There are also the names of the 2 Starfleet vessels dispatched to pursue the Titan. They're tributes to behind-the-scenes figures from the show's art department. One is a USS Sternbach, almost certainly named for artist Rick Sternbach, designer of countless starships during the TNG, DS9, and Voyager era. The other is a USS Cole, likely named for Lee Cole. She was an art director and graphic designer who helped define the interior aesthetic of the first TOS films. At the start of the 7th episode, Dominion, the Titan is hiding in a scrapyard in the Chintaka system. Located at the edge of Cardassian space, Chintaka is the site of 2 pivotal battles in the Dominion War. In the Deep Space Nine episode, Tears of the Prophets, Sisko and the crew of the USS Defiant led the Allied Federation, Klingon, and Romulan fleets in a successful invasion of Chintaka. They won the Allies their first offensive victory of the war. The Dominion wouldn't be on their back foot for long, however. The following year, in the changing face of evil, they would retake the system with the aid of their new members, the Breen. The Second Battle of Chintaka was a devastating defeat for the Allies. Using their deadly energy-dampening weapons, the Breen tore through the Federation and Romulan forces. This included the Defiant, whose wreckage can be seen floating in the window of the Titan's conference lounge. Also visible in the scrapyard are the remains of a massive Jem'Hadar warship. In the 8th episode, Surrender, Commodore Geordi LaForge reactivates the new Data and deactivates the partition between his different personalities. He hopes that Data's personality will win out over his malevolent brother Lore, with whom he currently shares a brain. Data is a gentle soul and has no interest in destroying Lore, whereas Lore is only too eager to take his brother apart piece by piece. Data realizes that he can use this to his advantage and willfully offers up his memories for Lore to steal.
These trinkets are my memories. The only sensible measure of the worth of a life.
As Lore gobbles up aspects of Data's life, he unknowingly becomes Data. This allows the 2 personalities to fuse into a single being. This new personality has Data's wisdom and kindness, as well as Lore's capacity for emotion and whimsy. We see this struggle take place inside the new android's head, as Data manifests his memories in the form of recognizable props from TNG. We see the hat and pipe from his Sherlock Holmes costume, which he first wore in the episode Elementary Dear Data. He also then summons a small holographic statue of the late Lieutenant Tasha Yar. Data had a brief intimate relationship with Yar in the episode The Naked Now. The memorial hologram was first seen in The Measure of a Man, and later in The Most Toys. Finally, Data offers up his cat Spot as a representation of his capacity to love. Longtime fans may chuckle to hear Spot referred to as a he, as the cat's sex inexplicably changed from male to female during TNG Season 7. Spot is now a boy cat again, at least in Data's memory. Season 3's penultimate episode, Vox, shows us a long-advertised Frontier Day ceremony in which the entire active Starfleet assembles for a single demonstration over Earth. This demonstration is displayed on a map behind the cast. A few of the ships were featured in previous Armada scenes in Picard Seasons 1 and 2. These include the USS Zhenghe, which Captain Riker commands in the standoff with the Romulans in the last episode of Season 1. Most of the fleet that investigates the anomaly in the Season 2 premiere, the Stargazer, is present here, including the Gilgamesh, Sutherland, Ibn al-Haytham, and the new Excelsior. Some of the ships are also named for prominent figures in the history of Star Trek special effects and production design. The USS Okuda, which also appears in the Stargazer, is certainly named for production designers and authors of multiple Star Trek reference books. Michael and Denise Okuda. The USS Drexler pays homage to the longtime Star Trek ship designer Doug Drexler, while the USS Trumbull likely pays tribute to the late Douglas Trumbull, a pioneer in special effects who passed away in 2022. We've also got ships named for important figures in Star Trek history, like the USS Cochrane, the USS John Kelly named after the pioneering astronaut from the Voyager episode One Small Step, and the USS Hikaru Sulu, who needs no introduction. Vox features a surprise appearance by Elizabeth Dennehy as Shelby, a beloved guest star from TNG two-parter The Best of Both Worlds. In those episodes, Shelby joins a crew of the Enterprise D to confront the Borg threat, even becoming the ship's new first officer after Captain Picard is captured by the Borg. Though Shelby's role in the two-parter is memorable, she never appears on the series again. Her only other canonical appearance is a cameo in the animated series Star Trek Lower Decks, by which time she has been promoted to captain. While she remained unused on television for decades, Shelby became a main character in Star Trek New Frontier, a long-running series of novels by Peter David and John Aldover. In the novels, she receives her first name, Elizabeth, and is eventually promoted to the rank of Admiral. Vox makes a point of establishing Shelby's name and rank as canon, even placing her in command of the USS Enterprise F during the Frontier Day ceremony.
There it is, right from the mouth of Admiral Elizabeth Shelby.
In the future of Star Trek, Federation starships aren't in the habit of measuring time by the same calendar that the viewers use at home. They still use the same minutes, hours, and years. But when someone asks what day it is, a Starfleet officer is bound to respond with something like Stardate 47988. Over the years, fans have engineered ways to roughly translate this into Earth dates, but this isn't an exact science. Every once in a while, however, circumstances provide us with the tools we need to pin the events of a given episode to an exact date on our calendar. We've known all along that Season 3 of Picard is set in the year 2401, as confirmed by showrunner Terry Matalas in interviews. It's also implied by the nature of the Frontier Day festivities, celebrating the 250th anniversary of Starfleet. This day marks the maiden voyage of the Enterprise NX-01, which began in 2151. In Vox, Admiral Shelby gets even more specific and notes that the NX-01's mission began 250 years ago today. Luckily for us, that launch predates the transition to the Stardate calendar. So thanks to Captain Archer's log entry from Broken Bow, the first episode of Star Trek Enterprise, we know that this episode of Picard takes place on April 16th. Several Star Trek alumni make their return in this episode exclusively in voiceover, most prominently Alice Krieg, who originated the Borg Queen in Star Trek First Contact and reprised it in the series finale of Star Trek Voyager, is back. She provides the voice of the Borg Queen during her confrontation with Jack Crusher. Krieg succeeds actor Annie Wershing, who portrayed the Queen in Season 2 of Picard. Wershing died of cancer in January of 2023 at the age of 45. And this season's premiere was dedicated to her memory. The late Major Barrett can also be heard in this episode, reprising the role of the Enterprise D computer via clips of archival audio. Barrett portrayed the default voice of the Starfleet computer across a plethora of Star Trek series, films, video games, and fan works from 1966 until her death in 2008. She also originated the roles of Nurse Christine Chapel and Number 1 on the original series, both of whom are now regular characters on Star Trek Strange New Worlds. She might be best remembered as Lwaxana Troi, Deanna's mother on Star Trek The Next Generation. She was also the wife of series creator Gene Roddenberry. Finally, the voice of Captain Ben Bassat of the ill-fated USS Excelsior is provided by prolific voice actor Nolan North, who has played multiple characters on Star Trek Lower Decks. He's best known as the voice of Nathan Drake in the Uncharted video game series. Since the entire modern Starfleet has been hijacked by the Borg, Picard and his old crew are forced to flee to the Fleet Museum and bring an old starship out of mothballs to confront them. As luck would have it, Geordi has been secretly reconstructing the USS Enterprise D, on which he and his surrogate family served during Star Trek The Next Generation. Obviously, the real reason why Picard's crew rise into battle aboard the Enterprise D and not the more advanced Enterprise E is because, by and large, the viewing audience doesn't have as much nostalgia for the dimly lit, battle-hardened E as they do for the cozy and familiar D. The characters do, however, offer a funny in-universe explanation. While en route to the Universe D in Space Dock, Geordi mentions that it's a shame that they're unable to use the Enterprise E, after which everyone side-eyes Worf. Worf responds defensively.
That was not my fault.
The line implies that he is somehow responsible for the loss of Picard's second Enterprise. This actually lines up with some backstory provided in a Star Trek Picard tie-in novel, The Last Best Hope by Una McCormack. There we learn that after Picard is promoted to Admiral, he chooses Worf to succeed him as captain of the Enterprise E. The exchange in Vox implies that this is canon, and that Worf's tenure as captain of the Enterprise had an unexpected conclusion. In the Enterprise's Star Trek Picard log on Instagram, the ship's final mission is listed as classified. The series finale, The Last Generation, opens with the crew of the refurbished Enterprise D listening to an audio distress call sent by the president of the United Federation of Planets, Anton Chekov, voiced by original Star Trek cast member Walter Koenig. Koenig's casting, along with a reference to his father, implies that President Chekov is the son of Commander Pavel Chekov, former navigator and weapons officer of the Enterprise under James T. Kirk. Chekov says that his father was fond of saying there are always possibilities, a phrase favored by Pavel Chekov's shipmate Spock. In Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Kirk reminds Lieutenant Saavik of this fact.
As your teacher, Mr. Spock, is fond of saying, I like to think that there always are possibilities.
President Chekov shares his first name Anton with late actor Anton Yelchin, who portrayed Pavel Chekov in the rebooted Star Trek film trilogy. Yelchin was tragically killed in an accident in 2016, making this a touching tribute to an absent friend. The text of President Chekov's message also closely resembles one sent by a previous Federation president in Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, when the Earth is under attack by a strange alien probe. Both messages include the phrases, "Do not approach Earth," and "Save yourselves, farewell." In both The Voyage Home and The Last Generation, our heroes are fugitives from Starfleet, who must return to Earth in a stolen vessel to prevent a global disaster. While playing the audio message, the text on the Enterprise D's view screen mentions General Order 12, a Starfleet directive mentioned in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan that requires that vessels go to red alert when any vessel approaches without first establishing communications. Also noted are Starfleet Order 104, which requires that commanding officers exhibiting strange behavior be relieved of duty, and Regulation 19, Section C, which allows another officer to take command in an emergency. To retake the bridge of the USS Titan from the assimilated junior officers, Seven, Raffi, and a few other grown-ups rig phasers with transporter technology in order to instantly beam anyone they shoot into the secured transporter room. The plan works, allowing them to capture their Borgified shipmates without harming them.
Good job routing transporter fields through phasers. You may have just invented the portable beam-me-up.
This particular use of transporter technology is something new for Star Trek, but it's not the first time we've seen portable transporter technology or the use of a transporter as a weapon. On Star Trek Voyager, the Vidians use weapons similar to Raffi's new rifles, which fire a phaser-like beam at their targets that transports individual organs out of their victims. Voyager's cook Neelix falls victim to one of these weapons in the episode Phage, when a Vidian makes off with both his lungs. Of course, this happens years before Seven joins the Voyager crew, so maybe she wasn't aware of it. Similarly, in Star Trek Insurrection, the Sonars employ drones that fire small transporter tags, beaming whatever they hit up into holding cells aboard their ship. Raffi's rifles seem to be an evolution of this technology, as they do not appear to require any kind of projectile to lock onto a target. Seven's reference to a portable transporter might actually be a call forward to a technology that we know to be commonplace in the distant future of Starfleet. In later seasons of Star Trek Discovery, set over 600 years after Picard, tiny transporters become integrated into Starfleet badges, allowing officers to instantly beam between any 2 points. The Last Generation contains a handful of smaller nods to other Star Trek films and episodes, including some direct visual references. The shot towards the end of the episode of the Enterprise D and the Titan A flying side by side framed against Earth's sunrise evokes a similar shot towards the end of Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, in which the Enterprise A and the Excelsior fly one final time together before parting ways. The rechristening of the USS Titan as the new Enterprise parallels a reveal in Star Trek IV, when the USS Yorktown is renamed the Enterprise A in tribute to Kirk and his crew. Both of these reveals take place in space dock, as the captain of the old Enterprise approaches via shuttle. In the final scene of the series, Worf mentions that he will be teaching a seminar about Mugatu meditation. It's possible that Worf is referencing a Mugato, sometimes pronounced Mugatu, which is a giant horned ape creature seen in the original series episode A Private Little War. However, it's also possible that this is a subtle nod to Strange New Worlds character Lan Noonien Singh and her 7th lesson of security.
Leave no stone unturned. I usually require cadets to look under Mugat and breathing stones for that one.
When asked to propose a toast, Data breaks into a saucy limerick that he once tried to recite in the Season 1 TNG episode, The Naked Now. Just like last time, he is interrupted before he can finish. Finally, we close on the crew playing poker, like in the TNG finale All Good Things. And the final shot of the series under the credits is patterned closely after the final shot of The Next Generation, right down to the rotation of the camera over the poker table as Picard deals.